The applause for Cameron Hale's promotion had barely faded when Richard Hale found Monica Reed alone in the conference room. Through the glass wall, Cameron was still smiling as coworkers congratulated him on becoming operations director, the position Monica had spent years preparing for. Richard placed a thick transition binder beside her notebook. "I need you to get Cameron up to speed. Nobody knows this operation better than you." Monica looked at the binder, then at the man who had supervised her for 9 years. "If nobody knows the job better than I do, why am I training the person who got it?" Richard's hand remained on the binder. For several seconds, he said nothing. Monica had expected losing the promotion to hurt. She hadn't expected to be asked to help prove that giving it to someone else had been the right decision.
Before we go back and see how Monica ended up in that room, ask yourself one thing. If a company says your knowledge is essential, how much should that matter when it decides who gets the authority? Keep that question with you. And welcome to Tales by Akanji. At 38, Monica had spent 9 years at Bennett Rowe Facilities Group, becoming the person people looked for when ordinary solutions stopped working. Richard had encouraged that growth. He gave her difficult accounts, supported her certifications, and gradually trusted her with responsibilities beyond her title. For almost a year, Monica believed those responsibilities were preparing her for something. She had never expected Richard to give that something to another person, especially someone named Hale. 3 months earlier, Monica's title had still been Senior Operations Manager, but her work had already begun stretching beyond it. One Tuesday morning, Denise Walker appeared beside her desk holding a staffing schedule. "We lost 2 technicians at the medical center." "When?" "One called out, the other got pulled into an emergency job." Monica studied the schedule. "Move Jackson to the medical center until noon. Let Aaron know we're pushing the retail inspection until 3. I'll call the client." Denise smiled. "You already had that answer?" "No, I just don't like staring at problems." Later that morning, Monica handled an angry client threatening to escalate a service complaint. Richard stopped beside her desk after the call. "You know what I like about you?" Monica glanced up. "That I don't transfer angry clients to you?" Richard laughed. "That too." Then his expression changed. "David's leaving at the end of the quarter. The director position will open." Monica sat a little straighter. Richard noticed. "You should apply." "I'm planning to." "Good. Half the time you're already doing pieces of that job anyway." The comment stayed with her. It wasn't a promise. Monica knew better than to treat encouragement as a contract. But Richard had spent years giving her harder assignments, recommending her for certifications, and telling her she was capable of more. So Monica applied. For once, she allowed herself to imagine the responsibility she carried might finally come with matching authority. The first interviews went normally. Then Monica stepped out of an afternoon meeting and saw Richard crossing the operations floor with a young man she didn't recognize. He was tall, polished, and wearing a navy suit that looked slightly too formal for Bennett Rowe's practical office culture. Richard's hand rested briefly on his shoulder. Denise noticed Monica watching. "Who's that?" "I don't know." Aaron looked over his monitor. "Cameron Hale." Monica turned. "Hale?" "Richard's nephew." Monica didn't respond. Later, she learned Cameron was 29 and had several years of legitimate business management experience. His resume was respectable. He'd supervised teams before and had handled regional accounts at his previous company. That mattered to Monica. She refused to decide a man was incompetent simply because he had the right last name. Still, when Richard introduced them, the process suddenly felt different. Cameron, this is Monica Reed. She knows operations better than almost anybody here. Cameron shook her hand. I've heard a lot about you. Hopefully some of it was good. All of it. Cameron's smile seemed genuine. That almost made the situation harder.
Monica returned to her desk afterward and opened the presentation she'd prepared for her final interview. For the first time since applying, she wondered whether the interview was still deciding anything.
The announcement came the following Monday. Cameron Hale was Bennett Rowe's new operations director. Monica sat through the applause. When the meeting ended, she shook Cameron's hand. Congratulations. Thank you. He hesitated. I know this probably feels awkward. That was more honesty than Monica expected. I'll be fine. She wasn't. But Cameron hadn't made Richard's decision, and Monica wasn't going to turn disappointment into a public performance. Then Richard found her in the conference room. After Monica asked why she needed to train the person who had received the job, Richard pulled out the chair opposite her. This isn't about you not being qualified. Monica stared at him. That doesn't make me feel better. Cameron brings outside experience, a different perspective. And what do I bring? You know how valuable you are. Monica glanced through the glass toward Cameron's new office. Richard continued. There'll be other opportunities. So maybe next time?
Monica, you chose him. That's your decision. But now you're telling me the person you chose needs me to teach him the operation? Richard rubbed his jaw. I need you to be professional about this. That word landed badly. Professional. As though disappointment and professionalism could not occupy the same room. Monica eventually nodded. I'll handle the transition. She would not punish Denise, Aaron, the clients, or her own reputation because Richard had disappointed her. But when she walked out carrying the transition binder, losing the job no longer felt like the only betrayal.
At first, Cameron asked normal questions. Where were vendor evaluations stored? Which managers handled after-hours escalations? Who approved emergency staffing? Monica answered. Cameron took notes. He was attentive, asked sensible follow-ups, and rarely needed the same thing explained twice. Then the questions changed. A hospital client wanted to alter its service schedule. Cameron came to Monica's desk. If we agree to this, what breaks? Monica reviewed the schedule. The Friday coverage. You'd be moving the only crew with the required clearance. So what would you do? She gave him an alternative. 2 days later, another client threatened to reduce its contract. Cameron appeared again. Can I run something by you? Soon he wasn't asking Monica where information lived. He was asking how she interpreted it. One afternoon, they stood beside an operational map while Monica showed him why a staffing adjustment that looked efficient on paper would create a coverage gap every Friday afternoon. Cameron listened carefully. You've seen this happen before. Twice. He changed the plan. The next morning, Monica watched through the conference room glass as Cameron presented the revised recommendation to leadership. The presentation went well. It should have. The recommendation was sound. But as Monica returned to her desk, she noticed the difference between teaching someone the system and continuing to supply the judgment that made the system work.
The pattern became clearer over the following weeks. Cameron would bring Monica a difficult problem, listen to her reasoning, then carry the answer into the next leadership conversation. He never stood in a meeting and claimed, "I thought of this myself." That would have been easier for Monica to confront. Instead, he simply allowed people to reach their own conclusion. At the monthly leadership meeting, Cameron explained how the department had stabilized a difficult retail account. Evelyn Brooks, Bennett Rowe's COO, looked over the numbers. The client was preparing to reduce scope last month. They were, Cameron said. And now they've renewed? Yes. Evelyn nodded. Good recovery. Thank you. Monica sat farther down the table. 3 days earlier, Cameron had spent 40 minutes at her desk asking her how to approach that exact client. Afterward, Aaron caught Monica near the elevators. I'll admit it, I wasn't sure about Cameron at first. Monica pressed the elevator button. And now, he's picking it up fast. Monica watched the floor numbers change above the doors. He is. She meant it. Cameron was learning. But that wasn't what bothered her anymore. Richard was watching Cameron succeed without seeing how often Monica still stood just outside the frame. The transition period they had agreed on had ended 11 days earlier. Monica checked the date again. Then she closed the binder. The next morning, she asked Richard and Cameron for 20 minutes. Monica placed the transition binder on the conference table. I think we've reached the end of this. Cameron looked at it. The training? The transition part. Yes. Richard leaned back. Is something wrong? No. Cameron knows the systems. He knows the accounts and the reporting structure. He's settled in. Cameron frowned. So, what changes? If you need information from my area, ask. If we need to collaborate, we collaborate. But I'm not going to keep making director-level calls behind the scenes. We're a team, Monica. I know. Then why does this feel like you're pulling away? Monica considered the question. Because somewhere along the way, training turned into me answering questions that should be answered by the person sitting in that office. Richard sighed. I thought we were getting past the promotion. This isn't me asking you to reverse your decision. She pushed the binder toward Cameron. You chose the director. I'm asking you to let him direct. Cameron's expression tightened. I've never taken credit for your work. I didn't say you had. That left the room quiet. Monica stood. I'll do my job. I'll help the team. I'll work with you whenever our responsibilities overlap. She looked at Cameron. But I'm done being the answer before you've had to make the decision. Then she walked out. For the first time in months, Monica had no idea whether Cameron would struggle. Part of her expected he would. That expectation didn't survive long. The first week after Monica stepped back was uncomfortable. Cameron asked fewer questions. Monica answered the ones that properly belonged to her area and resisted the instinct to fill every silence with advice. Then a client escalation landed on Cameron's desk. Monica knew about it because Denise mentioned it that morning. She spent half the day expecting Cameron to appear beside her desk. He never did. By 4 o'clock,
The issue was resolved. And he'd made the right call. A staffing problem followed the next week. Cameron handled that too. Then he simplified Bennett and Rowe's weekly reporting process, removing 2 approvals that had been wasting managers' time for years. Aaron walked into Monica's office holding the new template. "I hate to say this." Monica smiled. "Then don't." "This is better." She looked at it again. "It is. Are you okay admitting that?" Monica laughed. "I'm disappointed, Aaron. I'm not allergic to facts."
Still, the facts unsettled her more than she expected. For months, she'd imagined that once she stopped carrying Cameron, everyone would finally see how much she'd been doing. Instead, Cameron kept moving. Richard noticed. Employees noticed. Clients noticed. And Monica found herself wondering whether she'd built too much of her identity around being the person nobody could function without. One evening, she sat alone at her desk after most of the floor had emptied. Cameron's success didn't mean Richard had treated her fairly. It didn't erase the decisions she'd made or the years she'd given the company. And it didn't make her boundary petty. She finally understood something she hadn't expected to learn from any of this. She did not need Cameron to fail for her to have been wronged. The next morning, Cameron passed her desk after successfully resolving the Weston account. "Good call yesterday," Monica said. He stopped. For a second, suspicion crossed his face. Then he realized she meant it. "Thanks. You handled it well." Cameron walked away a little straighter. Over the next several weeks, his confidence grew. So did Richard's. The dangerous part was no longer that Cameron knew too little. It was that his recent successes were beginning to convince him there was very little he still needed to learn. The opportunity came from one of Bennett and Rowe's largest clients. They wanted to expand services across several additional properties. The contract was valuable. The implementation window was aggressive. Cameron wanted it. Monica reviewed the staffing plan twice before the meeting. She pointed to the capacity chart. "We can support the expansion." Cameron smiled. "Good. Just not all of it on that start date." His smile faded. Monica explained that simultaneous implementation would pull experienced technicians from existing properties before replacement staff finished training. Richard studied the chart. How much additional time? 3 weeks would make a major difference, or phase the properties. Cameron shook his head. "They're talking to competitors." "I know. If we ask for another 3 weeks, we could lose the expansion." "We could." Cameron leaned back. "Then we stretch. For a few days, maybe. This is longer than that. We've been conservative about capacity for years." Monica looked at him. "Capacity isn't a mood, Cameron." Richard stepped in. "Can operations make it work?" Monica answered carefully. "We can execute whatever timeline leadership approves. I'm telling you where the pressure will land." Cameron nodded. "Then we'll manage the pressure." A month earlier, Monica might have kept arguing. This time, she had given the information required for an informed decision. Richard backed Cameron. The commitment went forward. And Monica returned to her team. For the first several days, Cameron appeared to be right again. The first properties launched. The client was pleased.
Richard mentioned the expansion twice in leadership meetings. Then the schedule tightened. Overtime climbed. A medical center team lost 2 experienced technicians to the rollout. Another property reported delayed service. Denise began moving staff between locations with fewer options every morning. By Thursday evening, she appeared beside Monica's desk with a printed schedule covered in handwritten notes. "I can move Jackson again." Monica shook her head. "He's already worked overtime 3 nights." "I know." "Then leave him where he is." Denise lowered the paper. "What do you want me to do?" Monica hated the answer. "Nothing we can actually sustain."
That was the part Richard had always trusted Monica to avoid. She had built a career on finding one more option, one more workaround, one more way to keep the problem from reaching somebody above her. Later that evening, Richard came to her desk. Most of the floor was dark. "We need to stabilize this before the client escalates." Monica turned her laptop toward him. "I've moved every flexible resource we have without compromising the existing contracts." "Then get creative." "With what?" Richard lowered his voice. "You've solved worse." For a moment, Monica almost reacted the way she always had. Open another schedule. Call another manager. Find another person willing to work Saturday. Make the consequences disappear. Instead, she looked at the capacity numbers on her screen. The same number she'd shown before the commitment was approved. "Richard, I can help solve operational problems. I can't create people we don't have. I'm not asking for magic."
"You're asking me to make this timeline look sustainable after I told you it wasn't? This isn't the time to prove a point." Monica's expression hardened. "I'm not trying to prove one. Denise's people are exhausted. Existing clients are starting to feel the expansion. I will protect those accounts, and I will support this rollout within the resources we actually have." Richard stared at her. "And Cameron?" Cameron approved the timeline. "So you'll let him struggle?" Monica shook her head. "No, but I'm not going to do his job in secret because the decision got hard." Richard stood there another moment. Then he walked away. Monica watched him go and felt none of the satisfaction she once imagined this moment would bring. She only felt tired. 2 days later, the client filed a formal service complaint. Evelyn called a review.
The executive conference room was quieter than Monica expected. Evelyn sat at the head of the table with the implementation timeline open in front of her. Cameron spoke first. "We underestimated how quickly operations could reallocate staff." Evelyn looked toward Monica. "Was your team responsible for implementation?" "Yes, against the approved rollout schedule." Cameron shifted. The execution gaps are what triggered the client complaint. Monica felt Denise's exhausted face flash through her mind. This was the moment when the old version of Monica would have started explaining everything her team could have done differently. She didn't. Evelyn looked down at the timeline. "Who approved this implementation window?" Cameron stopped moving. "I did." "Was there a capacity review beforehand?" "Yes." "Were concerns raised?" Monica reached for her notes. Evelyn already had the project correspondence. There was nothing dramatic in it. No hidden recording, no trap. Just normal emails,
meeting notes, and capacity projection.
Monica had recommended a phased launch, or 3 additional weeks. Cameron had chosen simultaneous implementation. Richard had supported him. Operations had executed the approved plan with the resources available. Evelyn looked back at Cameron. Then we need to be careful about calling this an execution failure. Richard didn't defend him. His eyes moved from the timeline to Monica, then to the capacity projection he'd seen before the contract was approved. Monica recognized the expression. Not shock. Recognition. He was remembering all the times Monica had stepped in before a difficult decision became a visible problem. All the times he'd praised her for making things easier. This time, she had done her work without making his decision disappear. Monica folded her hands beside her notes. There was nothing else she needed to add.
Cameron wasn't fired. Monica didn't want him to be. He had made a poor judgment call, then tried too quickly to frame the consequences as an execution problem. That required correction, not destruction. Evelyn temporarily narrowed his authority over high-risk commitments and placed him under a formal development structure. Major expansions would now require additional review until he demonstrated stronger operational judgment. Cameron took the decision badly at first. But a few days later, he stopped beside Monica's desk. "I owe your team an apology." Monica looked up. "Yes." He gave a short, embarrassed laugh. "You could have made that easier." "I could have." "You didn't." "No." Cameron nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to understand why." Then he walked away.
Richard's conversation was harder. He asked Monica into his office the following week. There was no transition binder this time. "I owe you an apology," he said. Monica waited. "I kept telling myself I hadn't taken anything from you. Cameron could have the opportunity, and you'd still be here. The department would still be strong. Because I'd keep it strong." Richard looked down. Yes. Monica didn't rush to make him feel better. Richard continued. "I thought because you could handle it, you would." That was the problem. He nodded. "I know." Monica believed his apology. But belief wasn't restoration. Richard had spent years as the supervisor whose judgment she trusted most. Now she knew there were circumstances where his judgment about her could be shaped by what was convenient for him. They could work together again. The relationship would not return to what it had been.
Soon afterward, Evelyn asked Monica to meet. Bennett Rowe had been reviewing its operational structure before the rollout problem, and the review had made one issue difficult to ignore. Monica's responsibilities had grown far beyond the authority attached to her position. Evelyn proposed a formal senior operations function with independent decision rights over staffing capacity, service continuity, and implementation readiness. It wasn't Cameron's office. Monica was surprised by how much that mattered to her. Months earlier, she would have measured justice by whether she finally received the title she'd lost. Now she asked different questions. What decisions would actually belong to me? Evelyn explained. What would I be accountable for? Evelyn explained that too. Monica took the offer home overnight. The next morning, she accepted. Not because Cameron had failed, not because Richard finally felt guilty, because the authority matched work she was willing to own. On her first morning in the new workspace, Denise and Aaron stopped at her door with a routine question. Monica answered it. They thanked her and walked away.
Nobody left a crisis behind. On the shelf beside her desk sat the old transition binder. Closed. For the first time, Monica didn't look at it and think about the job she'd lost. She thought about the responsibility she'd finally stopped carrying for 40.
Months later, Monica was still the person people trusted when work became complicated. She still helped. She still collaborated. And when someone else's problem genuinely touched her responsibilities, she stepped in without keeping score. What disappeared was the expectation that she would quietly absorb every consequence simply because she was capable of doing it. One Friday evening, Monica closed her laptop and walked past the operations floor. No one chased after her with a problem that belonged to somebody else's office. She had spent years believing that if she became valuable enough, recognition would eventually follow. What finally changed her career was learning that value also needed boundaries.
The part I respect most about Monica is something quieter than the confrontation. When Cameron started doing well, she didn't need to pretend he was useless just to make what happened to her unfair. Both things could be true. He could grow into the work, and Richard could still have handled Monica badly. That takes a kind of honesty that's difficult when you're the one who was overlooked. Maybe that's why her final boundary feels different. She wasn't trying to prove Cameron didn't belong. She was finally deciding what belonged to her.
So, where do you draw the line? Was Richard's biggest mistake giving Cameron the promotion, or expecting Monica to keep carrying part of the job afterward? Tell me which one mattered more to you. And if you'd like to hear another story with me, subscribe to Tales by Akanji. I'll see you in the next one.